business opportunities in the GBA, of course, in many areas. I won't go into that today, but I would precisely today I will talk more about the administrative department, in the GBA that can enhance themselves and to build themselves, upskill their teams, through Western experiences like Richard and through the expertise like Richard and Angela. So I don't want to go on too long, and then I think there will be a 35 minutes presentation by my two good friends Richard and Angela. So I pass it on to you, Richard. Okay, from Bristol.
Thank you very much, Thomas, and welcome everybody, and thank you so much for joining today. We obviously thought that it would be a good idea just for me and Angela to share a little bit about what we're experiencing with our clients through COVID-19 and some of our observations about what sort of HR and training support is kind of needed to help businesses to bounce back. So we know that this is going to be, not everything, and we know that different businesses will be, and different individuals will be experiencing, different challenges and changes. But these are some of, from our perspective, this is some of the points that we wanted to raise some awareness of. So to set the scene, really, obviously, as everybody has already mentioned, we are in unprecedented times, and everybody's describing this as a storm that we're all experiencing together. Of course, what we know is that from some businesses and from some individuals, everybody's going through this storm in their own fairly unique way. I think the key thing here is that some sectors are doing well and some sectors are having a very challenging time. But also thinking about the HR and training aspects of organizations is actually every individual is experiencing this as well. Every employee is going through this storm and this challenging period in their own individual and unique way. So from an employer's perspective, obviously what we need to do is we need to support our teams and to build cohesion to help everybody through this. Because obviously it's those, we're all going through this change curve where, and I know that, in China, you're a bit further ahead of that change curve than we are here in the UK. But what we know is that the pandemic is going to have a surge effect, and we're probably going to see, COVID-19 popping up every now and again. So this change that we're going to be going through all together, already businesses are adapting, already employees are adapting, but those employers that adapt well will survive, will revive, and will thrive in the future. So I'm hoping that some of the points that we address today, really help your organization to think about that revival and thrive perspective. And what we also know here in the UK, what we know is about 2 in 5 businesses will be shedding staff over the next few months. That's in some ways that can be seen as a negative, but in a positive way, what we know is that some businesses are growing and taking on, so workforce distribution is changing. It might be that somebody has their microphone on. If you could mute it or your mics, that would be great, and then we won't have an echo. That's great, thank you. So we're going to just touch on, we've clustered, me and Angela sort of clustered some points around 5 key areas. One is leadership, another is structure, and how structures are changing in organizations, employee processes, and technology and the impact that that's having. And finally, this area around high performance. So I'm going to touch on some observations around leadership, and before handing over to Angela to talk about structure and process. So what I would comment on is, we know around the world, politically and in business, that we're seeing a shift in those leadership styles that are succeeding over others. And I'm calling this sort of emergent leadership around basically those leaders are now empowering teams much more because we've been forced to. Everybody's had to sort of spend some time working from home or remotely. And what that's done is that the countries and the companies that are succeeding are those that are empowering their teams, those organizations that information flows, giving their staff the right information at the right time, are succeeding over others. This is a more general comment around leadership, but also those organizations that are communicating very clearly with their teams what's going on and what's happening in their business and how they're going to get through this change. And the final point is around those leaders that are paying much more attention to actively listening to their employees and getting feedback and adapting to that change through this pandemic. So if we look across the world, we can see that also playing out politically with those leaders that are actually, applying those sorts of principles and practices. What I would say is here in the UK, what is becoming particularly important is the health and well-being of employees. And, I've put the picture up there of you cannot pour from an empty cup. Everybody has been going through this change, and this has been a very tiring experience for a lot of people. Not only are we dealing with challenges at work, but people are having to deal with challenges at home. And everybody's experience is very unique through that. So certainly here in the UK, we've seen a twofold increase in stress and mental health in the workplace. World Health Organization warned us about this very early on, and we're now seeing play out, ONS here in the UK, the Organization of National Statistics, has already said in the last week that we're up 100% in stress and mental health issues occurring in the UK. So no doubt this pandemic is affecting employees, and some of that might be hidden away. So one of the things that I would, really advise during this period of pandemic is, what can employers do, to make sure that staff are being trained effectively in managing their well-being. And most importantly, for those organizations to focus more on the sort of line management training around that sort of aspect, because line managers are going to be seeing, on the front line, are going to be experiencing with their employees the symptoms of stress and mental health in the workplace at the very first. So if we can ensure that line managers have the right skills to deal with those sorts of issues, teams will bounce back faster, because obviously people's health will affect productivity, it will affect performance. So looking after people's health and making sure managers have the skills to encourage a good mental health and well-being and a healthy and safe place to work. So I did want to sort of mention that as a first leadership real responsibility is around this health and well-being of your teams. So we've summarized, after today, you don't need to write these down, we've summarized these questions into a one-page handout, which we'll send out at the end of this webinar. But the key question here around health and well-being is making sure, as Edith said at the beginning, that actually employers are being clear on, all the social distancing and compliance aspects, but equally as important, their physical and their mental health during this period of time. And the second real sort of point I wanted to make around leadership is, if you don't know where you're going, anywhere will do. And this change that we're all having to adapt to in terms of market force changes and all the change that we're experiencing within our companies means that leaders must be clear on where they're going next. And that might be a number of scenarios because we don't know how this is going to play out. But certainly when I've been working with leadership teams around their strategic planning, is to say what you can plan for, what we have in our control is the known new normal. And we do know that this pandemic is going to play out in the longer term. But if you're the bird at the ahead of that flock, you're not going to be able to bring people along with you unless leaders have clarity around their strategy, their goals, and how they are going to pivot their business models through this pandemic. And the point I wanted to make about pivoting business models is that, you know, we ourselves in training, you know, I've had to pivot our business from a face-to-face workshop training business to a virtual training business over this period. So if we aren't adjusting from old mindsets to new mindsets, which is very much around culture change, then we will not thrive. So another question here is, you know, what are your businesses doing to pivot your strategies and also to bring people along in terms of changing behaviors, changing attitudes, changing paradigms, so that you can get the future results that your business needs to survive. So I think this is a hugely creative and innovative time, and certainly lots of businesses are finding new ways to sell their services, sell their products, and adapt to this new opportunity, as well as some change and challenges. So yeah, my finishing point really on the leadership aspect is really think about re-examining what your purpose is, what your strategy is, and your plans going forward, because it's important to keep people engaged, your employees engaged with where you're going, your strategy and direction, so that they know what contribution they need to make. And that's becoming quite difficult with remote working because people are feeling slightly less engaged with their employer. And the other area there, as I've just sort of said, really is about pivoting your business models and then aligning your HR and training strategies to really meet those needs. So I'm going to hand over to Angela now to talk more around the structure and process change that we're seeing in HR and training. Thanks.
Thank you, Richard. Now, now, currently, the structures of many companies continue to be functional and hierarchical because this allows the top leaders to design and define business directions and strategies or budgets or deadlines. Now, certainly, there are also companies adopting matrix structures for employees of different functions working together on project teams. But these structures, well, they are typically suitable for companies with well-defined guidelines and procedures. However, neither of them can effectively cope with the sudden changes in the socio-economic environment, just like what we have nowadays with the COVID-19. That's, we have already seen many employees are compelled to work from home for the first time in their lives. And it seems, well, although it seems that they have more freedom and flexibility at work, they are reported to have stressed out by the imbalance between work and family. And they feel disconnected, and the manager can no longer measure the performance by their time at work. So, going into the next slide. Yep. In order to support the sociological changes in the businesses, many companies are now considering to adopt more dynamic structures to put people of diverse functions and locations into specific task force, because the employees from different locations are now connected by technology. And the other thing is, this dynamic team structure will undoubtedly impact the working environment. Next slide, please. Richard, please, thank you. Now, in the future, it will most likely be a blend of fixed office and remote working. And since workspace are getting more fluid, we may no longer require massive office size, or we may even consider co-working space to save operational costs. And we may also be more robust in the configuration of our manpower. We may hire talents who wish to work remotely or work part-time, or we may even outsource some peripheral job roles. This can be a more cost-efficient measure for a business striving to bounce back from COVID-19. And I'd like to use a Tencent Holdings example here. Now, Tencent has already created virtual team structures and has redefined its job roles actually long before the COVID-19 outbreak, because it has anticipated the future technological trend despite the pandemic. So, and you know what happened? Because of this dynamic roles and structure, there was minimal impact to Tencent's operation in Wuhan, even during the first outbreak and the lockdown in Wuhan. So now Tencent was ready because it already has a contemporary structure that focuses on the agility and the mindset of the employees, their ability to deliver value, and their right skill base. And besides Tencent, there are many other companies that are working on more contemporary people structures like Google or Microsoft, you can name it. So maybe you can also review your people structure to see how you can stay ahead of the game. Okay, next slide. Now, as we are bouncing back from COVID-19, we are seeing more companies beginning to look critically into their structures and the job roles in order to make controls to minimize the damages into their businesses. So now, besides the key points that Richard has mentioned about leadership, we shall also recognize what are the core roles and responsibilities of the jobs that can drive your business future, and how do you construct a people structure that can accommodate to your business needs and to create a culture that your people are able to achieve the best results. Now, we have covered leadership and structure. The third area that we will talk about is processes. Now, company re-engineer people processes for the purpose that the employees can focus their time and effort into the top priority, and which is to drive higher performance and higher business growth. Now, on an HR perspective, I'm going to share with you that within the stages of an employee life cycle, which I see are the processes that add a high value to your business, and you and your HR team shall rationalize distinct procedures. In the bounce back, this is a good time to review and analyze how you can further drive operational effectiveness in your people processes. And a little bit of marketing here, that this is one of the key areas which Hewlett ran with the partnership of CW are supporting our clients with. Now, the employee life cycle encompasses various stages in the career of an employee. Next slide, please. Richard. Thanks. Now, from recruitment to onboarding, employee development, recognition, or retention of employee to offboarding. Now, but I like to use a bell curve to illustrate how rationalizing the processes can impact. This normal bell curve shows that the productivity of the employee will grow as he or she progresses in the company, and until a certain point of time when he has reached his career bottleneck or can no longer find fulfillment in the job, that he will lose momentum and will seek opportunities outside the company. Now, how are we going to get to this green bell curve? With the bounce back, we will focus on the measures that can increase the productivity and enhance the performance of the employee and prolong this employee life cycle to achieve high return on human resource investment. Okay, so I will briefly go over how we can maximize our people's performance. And let's start with the recruitment stage. Now, since more and more businesses or employers are starting to consider that the direction of their future hires can be both on-site or remote, you can now widen your geographical search, and you can recruit and even compensate more creatively based on the variation of the job roles. You and your HR team will have to consider where to advertise the jobs and how to advertise them to maximize the effectiveness. And by then, probably your HR person will likely tell you that the comp surveys are becoming less indicative, and you can be more flexible to pay for and buy the competence of the employees. Now, to spike the learning curve of the new hire during the onboarding, your HR business partner or whoever runs this role has to be more engaged with the manager and the new hire, because now that they are working remotely and cannot see each other frequently, a virtual HR check-in process to communicate with them and to check the pulse and to immediately mediate when things going off track will help the new hire to assimilate the job more effectively and efficiently. And going into the career development, I think it might resonate you that very often we find that performance reviews tend to measure the aptitudes of the employees as opposed to measuring the expected performance results or business outcomes. I have this experience of re-engineered the performance management system of a US-based high tech. The conventional reviews used to measure such job competence as job knowledge, quality of work, and even some unconvincing dimensions like attendance. So now, consequent to a thorough HR assessment, we have transformed their performance measurements from job competence to actual performance outcomes. And we have trained their managers on how to set purposeful performance measurements. This transformation has proven to change the mentality of the staff, and they became more aligned with the company goals and directions, which in turn deliver remarkable business results. So I think you can also review your performance measurement process to see how it can align with the adjusted business strategies after the bounce back. And besides enhancing performance, we shall also embed, if you have not yet done so, an employee recognition program to retain talents. Richard has mentioned about the mental health impact of COVID-19. We know that many employees working from home for the first time in their lives are struggling between work and family, and they are feeling disconnected. They are more than ever needed to be recognized of what they have been going through. So a simple token of recognition, such as a broadcast from the leader about the significant achievement of an employee or a team, the manager showing concerns to the personal well-being of the employees, a small gift for the good work, or a celebration at the successful completion of a key project. Well, I just name a few, but all of these will make your employees feel reconnected, being recognized, and being instrumental. And they will be more motivated and even more committed to their work. Now, we always prompt ourselves that people will not remember what we said or what we did, but they will remember how we make them feel. So make sure you have the required tools to motivate your employees. Now, okay, a Harvard business study indicates that 71% of CEOs believe that their employees are the most important factor in the business success, and an HR strategy that aligns with the company strategy and business changes will determine how the people can meet the business needs and the customer demands. So the questions to provoke your thoughts are, in the bounce back, have you got an HR plan, a people structure, and HR processes that support your business direction and strategies? Do you have the performance measurements, performance measures that can drive high productivity? And how do you re-engineer your HR and training processes to improve the business efficiencies? Okay, Yeah, next I will hand over to Richard to talk about technology.
Thanks, Angela. And, bearing in mind with the time at the moment, I'll sort of try and sort of touch on the sort of two key elements around technology and HR and training. Two aspects really is, as your, HR and training technology, I've been in HR and training for over 25 years. And, I've seen the evolution of technologies within the HR and training arena, and it's radically different from when I started that long ago. But it's really a good time during this period of change to really review what HR and training technologies are out there that you can be utilizing. We know over COVID that organizations have been really harnessing certain technologies. I know Teams and Google and, we're all using Zoom, etc. But in the HR technology space, there are obviously some ways that you can automate and make managers' lives a lot easier and free up some time so that they can do more valuable things with their time. So whether you're an SME or whether you're an enterprise out there, it really is, I think, a critical time for you to almost like take a step back and do a review of what HR and training technologies you're actually harnessing or could be harnessing, or whether your existing HR technology is actually going to be fit for purpose for the future. So again, these are areas where we support. Do have a look at your HR technologies and whether they're actually going to serve you well in the long term, because they will save you cost and they will help managers to manage people well, and also reduce the amount of time that HR need to spend on manual procedures. The second point I wanted to make really around technology was, as Angela's alluded to, we've all been forced to upskill in many different ways. And I think what we've seen over COVID is three phases. When we all started, I know in China, a lot of you are back at work now, but a lot of us went through this period where, we were working from home and it was a novelty, and we got all this new technology, and there was a sort of a sharp learning curve, and then we kind of got into a rhythm. I think what we're seeing now through the pandemic is where people are working more flexibly and more remotely is for longer periods of time. And this is also borne out by feedback we're hearing from the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development here in the UK, is that people are feeling now sort of less engaged with their company. So a real warning sign around getting the balance right between working face-to-face and working remotely, I think is going to be something that we're going to have to work through together. But certainly upskilling people in some of the technology that we've been using. I mean, a lot of people have managed to get by, but I do know people personally in business and that we're working with that have felt the skills that they need to now thrive. They really need some training in some of these tools. For some of the more advanced sort of features and functions. So I think it's, look at the digital skills that your team now need, given the technology that you're giving them, and make sure you've got a plan in place, for upskilling. I think that's really important. The other point I was going to make around, training is virtual management. Managers are now having to manage remotely and virtually more. Some aren't. Obviously, some people have come back to work. But I think what we've all learned through the pandemic is, and I've used this illustration of a conductor and an orchestra, is that without seeing the orchestra, we can actually manage people. And the companies that have succeeded are those that have, as I said earlier, built up this very good trust base within their workforce. And they've managed to bring in the technologies to support that remote working. But I would say, how well are managers actually managing their teams? And are you now addressing virtual management skills to improve how they manage their people and productivity. And as Angela mentioned in that bell curve illustration, is, you know, an important point about improving and optimizing people productivity is making sure that managers are managing by outputs and not tasks. So again, that's an area where we're doing quite a bit of training, is in the remote and virtual management skills, alongside that process piece that, Angela was talking about. And I think, you know, the other final thing is, you know, at the beginning of today, Thomas mentioned about some of the work that we've been doing with HSBC, and some of that is around, reminded me to mention the important people in all of this as well, our customers. And our customers are changing the way that they're buying, which is almost forcing our teams and our employees to interact with customers in a new way. So certainly from a HR and training perspective, we're now having to look at what skills our workforce now need to engage with customers in this new known normal. And that does mean, you know, in terms of selling or in terms of service. So again, another thing to really think about is, you know, what are the skills that your teams now need to engage their customers well? And obviously sales is a good area to focus on, because without sales, a business can't survive. So it's important that your front end sales teams have those skills, and that's some of the work that we've been doing, is to address some of the training, you know, in some of these banking sectors we've been working with, to help them to keep their client relationships strong and to keep that pipeline of sales opportunities flowing through. So, you know, couple of questions there to think about. How can you automate some of your HR and training practices using technology? Think about the HR and technology you have in-house, but also you must have a plan now to think about upskilling all your staff so that they have the requisite digital skills that will really help the performance of your business to survive in the long term. So just a final point around high performance team cultures, which I'll hand over to Angela to talk about.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Now, company culture is an integral part of the business that embraces all the other 4 aspects that we have discussed about. And that is why culture is put in the center of everything. And well, I just saw a question in the chat box that how could companies ensure collaboration and trust within virtual teams? And this is exactly what we're talking about. If we have a performance culture prevailing in the business setting, the staff can be more engaged and will go extra miles beyond what is expected, even they are, remotely working. Now, Howard Schultz, the CEO of Starbucks Coffee, once said that when you are surrounded by people who share a passionate commitment around a common purpose, anything is possible. So now, we have summed up 6 factors that drive the high performance culture, which are easy to understand, but not so easy to do. And I will quickly run through each of them. And I suggest you to reflect how these factors are instilled in your business settings. And of course, if you are uncertain about it, we will be happy to answer more questions in the Q&A. So next slide, please, Richard. We're going into the 6 factors. Now, I will start from the top, the purpose-driven. A recent Harvard review of Harvard study found that the employees who derive meaning from their work report almost twice the job satisfaction and 3 times are more likely to stay with the company to feel the success. And there's another study from Deloitte shows similar results, that purpose-driven companies witness higher market share gains and grow 3 times faster than in average than their competitors, while achieving high workforce and higher customer satisfaction. So when your company has an identified common goal that is shared by your employees, it will drive collaboration and engagement. And we have emphasized measuring business results in the performance review process. When the employees are taking responsibility for achieving the business outcomes, they will be less tangled with the mundane work process, and in turn, they can build a culture of their own that can orient towards better results. To give you a real-life example about sense of urgency, we have recently worked with a European-based microelectronic company that has demonstrated high sense of urgency. Now, as soon as its leaders have recognized the overwhelming issue of COVID-19, they immediately set up a COVID response team with the local managers to regularly monitor the risk level of their office sites, and they articulated the revised work from home policy to the general employees. And more importantly, they took care of the stress issues. So all these acts have helped them to proactively tackle the challenges they face and have built even higher morale in their teams. So your agility in the response can actually help you to strive through the speed of change. Now, I think you don't need further explanation on why frequent, consistent, and transparent communication is important to building a performance culture. Now, of course, how to communicate effectively is another broad subject which we can discuss in another forum. Now, since I'm coming from an HR background, I always emphasize the importance of the HR philosophy and how to proactively identify the top performers and the key players, and at the same time, to address the poor performers. By differentiating the top performers and the poor performers by means of rewards, recognition, or development opportunities, the company is actually providing means for the top talents to achieve even better. And to maintain a committed staff force, a high-performance culture must embrace a learning culture. So coaching, selected training programs, assigned specific tasks, career counseling, leadership development, or succession planning. I mean, all these are the resources that you can use to help your employees to become part of the high performance and result-oriented culture. Now, the main theme here is to create a culture and the core values that can retain your top talents and maximize the performance in order to strive through this turbulence. So as a key point, I would like to quote Collie Schmidt in the next slide. Collie Schmidt has wrote a book, Forget Races, TLC Keeps Employee Around These Days. And he said that the reasons people stay in with their companies have less to do with the paycheck, benefits, and the perks. Instead, it is the intangibles such as respect, communication skills, and the culture of the workplace that persuade an employee to stay and have a long-term relationship. And it starts with the managers and the supervisors. Okay, that's all from me. I'll pass back to Richard.
So hopefully we've sort of illustrated in these 5 clusters of areas, around, just summarizing really that in terms of leadership, it's around health and the well-being of your teams. It's about giving leaders, and leadership teams that clarity and sense of direction, because a question in the chat box was around how do you keep people engaged remotely, etc. Well, primarily, you've got to make sure that leaders and managers know exactly where the company's going, what each of the functional teams in the business are doing, their goals and contribution to that strategy, and that they need to be communicating that fairly regularly and weekly. The other point I'd make around COVID is that mindfulness as leaders and management around chunking down big objectives into smaller weekly goals, because at the moment, looking too far out is a bit of an issue. So let's keep people focused on sort of weekly goals. So maintaining a weekly meeting, making sure that you're having regular one-to-ones with teams. That's going to be really important. The point that Angela has made around structure change, flattening structures, was also a very important point. Thinking about the job roles and how they're going to change, but also leaders in flatter structures it might mean that other managers are now taking on broader responsibilities. So that means that they now need to be able to be upskilled to manage either bigger teams or, as I said, other functional areas that they're now managing or dealing with. Processes, yes, look at your HR and training practices and processes. Are there ways you can streamline those to make your business more efficient? And again, as Angela said, that's something that she does a lot of work in. And from a technology point, look at your HR and training systems, look at the digital skills that your teams now need for the future and for their job roles and those changes in job roles, and the technologies that you've been bringing in, make sure that you're really honing those skills so that people can utilize them, especially with customers. And the final point, really finishing off there with that, which Angela's made around high performance culture. A lot of all of that stuff really drives culture. So hopefully we've given you some pointers, some ideas, some thoughts. We know it's sort of high level and we can give more specifics in the Q&A. But hopefully that's helped you think about ways that your organization can think about reviewing its HR and training practices to bounce back more effectively. So we're very open to a bit of a Q&A discussion now. So if there are some questions that we've got about 15 minutes or so that we can have a more open discussion. So feel free to pitch in, because you might have specific challenges that you want to ask about. So feel free to Edith, I don't know whether you wanted to also look at the chat box and see if there's any questions that we can.
Well, sure. Actually, we have questions coming in while you and Angela are speaking. So it's a very interesting session. Thank you very much for all the insights. One question we have received is that what trend do you see or suggest as a company director should keep talent engaged while working from home? Although we know that working from home is actually technically feasible, but somehow the employees feel disconnected from the company's objectives. So what kind of advice would you provide to both the companies and the employees?
Yeah. Some of the points I've made there already around regular weekly online meetings with the team. I also think it's an incredibly important time to brainstorm and to keep employees actively involved in innovating. So, sometimes having less structured meetings, but thinking about getting your teams engaged in how we can drive change, what they're experiencing, and also to think about what I would call check-ins. And a check-in is actually about them. It's about asking them, how are you feeling? How is your situation? And making sure that we're not just, thinking about what the business is achieving, but we're also showing compassion, and that we're also showing care for our employees and their well-being and their families and all of that. So I think, people don't, in this situation, we need to show leadership. And showing leadership is about also showing that you care for people. So
right, it's true. We have come across many articles saying empathy is actually one of the core elements of leadership, showing empathy, maybe not only for leaders, but also for everyone in the company, showing empathy to your peers, to your subordinates, to your boss. Even your boss would also need some kind of empathy or care from the colleagues as well, because we all know the one at the top is quite lonely out there. Perhaps the second question for Angela is that how could companies ensure collaboration and trust within these virtual teams?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the question. I think just now on talking about the high performance culture, I have already touched on this. That in order, if we have build up a culture, a high performance culture or result oriented culture in the company, it's more likely that we can put the people together to be more cohesive, even if they are working, in different locations. And this is, on top of what Richard has explained just now on checking in, I think this is also a time that especially the HR business partner to be to provide more strategic support to the teams in checking in their pulse on whether they are working, together on a regular mode. Although they are working remotely, the managers can still check in with the employees from time to time to see whether they are doing good, how they are feeling, what kind of difficulties they are having working from home. So all these check-ins will help to put the people together and to build a trust in the company that the leaders are taking care of the stress of the employees. And since right now talking about the empathy of the leaders or the managers, actually empathy nowadays is not just an attribute. It is a skill, like emotional intelligence, that we are trying to help our clients with.
Can I just also add
Right.
to that?
Wait, thank you so much. We have a third question. Richard, would you like to take that? What do you see would be the major new normal?
Yeah, no, certainly. A few things which we kind of touched on, but I'll reinforce them, is what we're going to see is more fluid structures, working structures. So, as Angela alluded to, thinking about, how people can work more flexibly. So some organizations have flexible working policies. Some are kind of now learning that they can have them. So that's going to be a new normal. Flexible working practices is going to be a new normal. Digital technologies that we're seeing help people to work more effectively together. That's a new normal. Virtual training, webinars, all of this is going to be part of our new normal, our new known new normal. We've seen it works, we're experiencing it. We're all becoming fairly competent at using this technology. That is going to be part of our new normal. So important to make sure everybody's using it well. E-learning, obviously, I do a lot around e-learning and virtual training. That's going to be another way, because as individuals are at home more, they can actually use the time, to do their own learning. So I think you're going to see there has been a surge already in online learning over this period. And Edith, you made the point at the beginning about people using this time to upskill and themselves in more broader areas. So that's going to be part of the new normal. The other thing I'd say is that we know that this is going to be around, pandemic's going to be around for at least another year or so, or 18 months before we see some vaccines being deployed. So we're going to have to work like this. We are going to see some surges popping up, we'll get through it. I'm sure we will, but it'll be those organizations that are helping their teams to navigate this storm together that will survive.
That's great.
Was there any other questions or any other points people wanted to sort of make, perhaps from their own experiences or around HR and training?
I think the discussion so far is involvement towards a hybrid working method or hybrid office, where people have the flexibility, as you mentioned, to partly work from home and partly work in the office. But I just came across an article in the Fortune 100 magazine that actually some great company CEOs also mentioned nothing can replace face-to-face meeting. Yeah. It's like right now I cannot see your whole full body language. So perhaps, as you said, when this pandemic is over, like within 2021, hopefully, we will be back to another kind of new normal, yeah, and have some face-to-face interactions.
Yes, and I think also we'll see what's called lots more blended learning approaches as well, where you're doing face-to-face, some of your training face-to-face, some of it online. The same with working practices. I think we're just going to see much more blended approaches to working. Thomas, I think, wanted to make a few points, and I've just got probably just a point to make, that obviously, these are the sorts of areas that we're supporting people in, is yes, helping leadership teams, helping management teams and sales teams, and the areas that Angela works in is around high performance teams and performance management. And I sort of spend a bit more time on the health and well-being aspects around mental health. Yeah, Thomas, did you want to say a few words?
Yes. I want to say a few words to all the participants. All right. Now, I'm very interested in your presentation, Richard, as well as Angela's presentation. Of particular interest to me is we call the virtual selling skills and also the virtual management skills. Can you elaborate these two topics? I think the selling skill that goes to virtual, I think will be a trend in the future, because, you know, people, if after adopting, you know, that they don't need to travel, they still can do business during the pandemic. And after the pandemic, I think people will be less inclined to travel. They want to stay home with their family, you know. So how do they sell their product? How do they sell their services? You know, I think virtual selling skills is coming up very, very important. So in my limited knowledge, it will be only through emails or through e-commerce and et cetera. So with your expertise, you selling, you coaching HSBC, all right? Now that HSBC is growing in the Greater Bay Area, can you share with us how you can coach, you know, overseas clients if they have a base in the Greater Bay Area? How you can coach them that they can do it virtual sales, you know, without coming to Greater Bay Area? So the question to you, Richard.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what we're doing already, which is virtual training. So, you know, we took what was we've had to take face-to-face workshops, redesign them so that they're fit for purpose in a virtual training capacity. So, you know, we're taking what would be face-to-face workshops, spreading them out a bit, chunking them down into smaller modules that people can absorb, because, you know, online learning can be quite tiring. So we're breaking that training down into modules. But in terms of how we're adapting, I mean, I'll just give you an illustration of how we've changed some of the training. We've had actors, we've employed actors to come in and do role plays as clients on Zoom. But seeing how people are using that Zoom to Zoom interaction with the client and helping them with things like, you know, building the rapport with the client, making sure they're asking the right questions, making sure they're taking and moving the relationship forward, and making sure, obviously importantly, that they keep that pipeline coming in. So it's really the skills around doing that online. The other point I'd raise around sales is that obviously a lot of social media platforms are now playing a bigger role in the sales pipeline process. So, you know, we're doing it as well, aren't we, Thomas? You know, we're using a lot of LinkedIn more. So again, making sure that some of your sales teams have those requisite skills in using some of those networking platforms that are out there to the best of their ability. The other point I'd make about multinational sales teams is actually it's, you know, online has given them, you know, ironically, it's given them better ways of working with the client. So we've been encouraging sales individuals to bring other team members into, you know, Zoom calls with clients and things like that, so that they can develop, you know, the broader relationships across the business, and also just to show what other things that you can do as a company for that client. So I don't know, has that kind of helped answer that question? I think we've got about a minute left on the call as well, just to let you know.
So we pass it back to Edith, right? So
Well, thank you so much to all the speakers as well as the participants. I think it is a very fruitful section, and it's a never-ending learning process for us. So we will have to continue to soldier on under the current circumstances. I think some of the most important attributes are resilience and mental strength, keeping the employees both physically and mentally healthy, showing care to our colleagues, our friends, And that's really the key to helping us get through this all together.
Thanks, Edith. And
Thank you.
Just to say, the slide that you're seeing now is a one-page handout which summarizes the key questions from today's webinar, which we will email to all of you today for attending. You know, thanks very much for joining us from me. You know, if you need to get in contact with any of us, please reach out. If we can help in any way, we'd love to, and good to meet you all online today.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you, Edith. Thank you, Thomas.
Okay.
Bye-bye.